Hi everyone, what's up? Joshua here from Alternative Brewing, and today we're joined by an old friend, the Fellow Ode Brew Grinder, and some new 64mm Silver Knight flat burrs made by SSP Grinding Solutions. Now, in our last review of the Ode, which you can find right here, we poured over the grinder's specs. And if you're familiar with the Fellow Ode, then you're aware that along with its popularity and its features, there lies a small limitation in the grinder's ability to grind finer than about a 450 to 500 micron grind size, which is still too coarse for some filter brewing. Take a look at, as an example, the most recent developments in pour over brewers, where there is this trend towards faster flowing brew methods, and then the use of finer grinds to obtain higher extraction yields are attained, and even styles of brewing with the AeroPress and mocha pot brewing are out of the question, as the Ode doesn't grind fine enough with its factory burrs. All that can change with a new set of burrs. Now, there are a few types of 64mm SSP burrs available, and you can shop the full range from this link up above, but stay with me now as we learn how to install these new burrs and everything you should know before doing so. So let's go over a few points. Like, there's nothing actually wrong or bad with the standard Fellow Ode burrs. It's just that the SSP burrs are a more specialty burr set designed and manufactured under lower tolerances for the ultimate precision, and it is suggested that they will improve grind quality up to 20% at similar grind sizes. And this will have a positive impact to the extraction of your brewed coffee. But let's not forget, these same burrs also fit the Mazza Super Jolly Grinder and the Mazza Mini. So essentially, you could have 3 grinders all using the same burr set and producing identical results based solely on the burr sets themselves. Although the Fellow Ode does have all those other lovable features we like to see on consumer grinders, like the single dosing hopper, low retention and low motor RPMs, and a really cool look. So let's get these new burrs into our Fellow Ode. So to remove the old burr set, first grind out and remove all the beans from the grinder, and switch off and unplug the Fellow Ode from the wall. Then adjust your grinder to 11, so the coarsest setting, and we're going to keep it here for the entire process. Next, gently pull that faceplate off. It should pop off, and that's that grind selector plate off the front of the Fellow Ode. And with a Phillips head screwdriver, we're going to begin untightening and removing the 4 large screws underneath the faceplate. And this will allow us to remove the grind dial and then access the burr chamber. Here, we need to remove that auger key in the middle and then press on and pop out the auger with the rotational burrs. Now, if you can't pop this auger out this way, then use a pair of thin tip pliers or something similar to pull them out along with that burr spring. Next, remove the inner burrs or the stationary burrs by unscrewing the 3 screws that hold them at the back and in place. Remove the other 3 screws from the auger, holding those rotational burrs in place, and then isolate these burrs so as to not mix them up with the new burrs. And before we reverse the process and install the new burrs, now is a great time to clean inside the Fellow Ode's grind chamber and around that auger. Make sure there are no grinds underneath the new burrs when we do begin to screw them back into place. Now, the new burrs are either marked with each side that they are for, or if not, then inspect the profile and the thickness of the burrs, and the burrs with the thicker profile and visible teeth at the edge will be your rotational burrs, and they'll go on the auger. So to begin with, screw the stationary burrs into place at the back of the grinder. Then go ahead and add that burr spring. And next, we're going to attach the rotational burrs to the auger via its 3 screws. And once done, add this into the burr chamber. From here, we're going to line up the slot of the grinding drive shaft with that of the notch in the auger and insert the auger key into place once it is lined up. If you don't line it up straight away, remove the auger and gently place it into place so it does line up. Go ahead and attach the grind dial back onto the grinder, and then following that, add the faceplate back on gently by pressing it into position. And now all we have to do is plug the Fellow Ode back in to begin using it. However, with new burrs comes a period of breaking them in, and this is where the burrs need some coffee ground through them in order to remove any inconsistent edges off of the cutting blades that's there from manufacturing, and that's pretty standard of most new burrs. It takes somewhere between 2 to 5 kilograms of beans to remove this edge fully, and this is before you start to see the best consistent results in the cup. Ideally, use old stale beans, or go out and buy 5 kilograms of the cheapest beans around and then just burn through them as quick as possible. This way you're not wasting more expensive beans on subpar grinding results. Another consideration is calibrating the grinder. Currently, if I was to move that dial over finer, the burrs begin touching and chirping at around the 6 setting, which would be my finest setting, and this doesn't really allow me much of a range. So next I'm going to show you how to calibrate the Fellow Ode so you do have a full grinding range at your disposal. So to begin calibrating the Fellow Ode, first we're going to bring the grind dial to its finest possible setting. Just as you start to hear the burrs chirping and then touching, keep the setting here and then turn the grinder off. From here, we'll remove the faceplate once more and then unscrew the 4 smaller screws around the outside of the plate. And this will remove the grind dial without accessing the burr chamber. Underneath that, you'll find the grind adjustment wheel. And then independently of the wheel, turn the grind dial as fine as it will go to the left and then place it back over the wheel, and then in reverse order, place the 4 screws into place and then add the faceplate back onto the Fellow Ode. So we've just gone and calibrated the grinder, so the 0 setting is at its finest setting. And this will limit the range you have at the coarser end of the spectrum. So if you are more inclined to grind for coarser settings, what you can do is adjust the wheel clockwise when calibrating it. Make sure you count the clicks prior to placing the grind dial back on, and whether you went for 5, 6 or whatever extra coarser settings on that adjustment wheel, you have effectively then calibrated the grinder to be 0 plus 5 or 6 at your finest setting, and then you will find those coarser settings at the other end. And the big question is still there: will the Fellow Ode grind for espresso brewing? Yes, it will. Is it the best choice? I will say upgrading the Fellow Ode Burrs is not a necessity and isn't for everyone. First, if you already own an ode grinder for filter brewing, and unless you determine you'll be brewing espresso more predominantly in the future, or perhaps you're just really into your filter brewing and you want nothing but the best from your grinder, then spending what's almost the same amount of money on a burr set as was the grinder is going to feel a little superfluous. The second reason is the stepped settings on the Fellow Ode. Specifically for espresso brewing, it can be a little bit of a drawback. Not to say that stepped settings aren't espresso friendly, as we see on the Comandante hand grinder where it does quite well, but the steps on the Fellow Ode are a little bit bigger. Now, a smart barista could change up your dose, your yield, your time if you couldn't find that perfect grind size and still manage a good extraction, but it's not going to have that same micro adjustment you get from an espresso focused grinder. The third reason, and what I believe is the most important factor, is workflow. Now, the Fellow Ode was just not made to be an espresso grinder. Firstly, there is a good amount of retention that will occur on the finer settings of the Fellow Ode, as well as increased static at the espresso fine settings. Now, a spray of water into your beans prior to grinding can minimize this to some degree. And then there's the catch cup, which isn't very portafilter friendly. I mean, you can do it, but it will occasionally create a mess. I found a work around this, which was to place a 58mm dose cup inside the Fellow Ode's catch cup and then place the lid on and grind into it this way. That way, when it does come to dosing, you can remove that dose cup and then transfer it straight into your portafilter. And finally, and probably the more critical of everything, is that grinding for espresso on the Fellow Ode is not covered under the warranty from the manufacturer. Now to date, I'm yet to hear of any Fellow Odes burning out from brewing espresso, and I've considered things that, although you're grinding at finer settings and maybe placing undue stress on the motor of the Fellow Ode, espresso beans are usually a little bit more brittle than their lighter roasted filter companions. So there might be less force, or at least equal to that of grinding lighter roasted beans at coarser settings. And considering all of that, I will say though, grinding lighter roasted coffee at very fine espresso settings on the Ode, you will do at your own risk of voiding warranty. Now, speaking from my experience of using the Fellow Ode now for a few weeks and brewing espresso with the Rancilio Silvia Pro, my grind setting hasn't changed from a setting of 2 on the Fellow Ode. Persevering through that workflow, which did seem excessive at times and also a little messy, I've drunk some very tasty, clean, juicy and vibrant espresso shots from the Fellow Ode and the SSP Burrs. A majority of my shots, I was aiming for a standard espresso brew ratio of 20 grams in to 40 grams out in around 27 seconds, and this was fairly easy to achieve. However, those unimodal flat burrs on the SSPs did show more of a tendency to want to flow out fast turbo shots with higher yields and shorter brew times compared to, say, the regular conical burrs of a slower shot and average brew times. And dialing in on the SSP Burrs, there was really only one grind setting that was ever going to work for my particular brew recipe. Now, I haven't been a big filter drinker for a while here, but for the V60, the Kalita Wave and the AeroPress brewing methods I did test, there was a very nice clarity of flavor and cleanliness in the cup, but none of this really surprised me much from using SSP Burrs. I did have to recalibrate the grinder once to accommodate for one of those AeroPress recipes, and then I found I was dialing my espressos back in a little bit. Not a big deal, but it was worthy to note. And just as a visual reference, here are the differences in the grinds from each burr set, starting from 0 to 11 at the same grind settings, not dialed into the same grind sizes. But you do get a good feel of the higher uniformity of the grinds coming from the SSP Burrs. So that's the account of the Fellow Ode with new SSP Burrs, how to install them, and some of, or hopefully a majority of, what you can expect from using them and what you can expect from better tasting coffee. So if you have any questions on either of these two products, add them in the comment section down below and we'll get straight back to you. Don't forget to hit that little bell icon and the subscribe button on your screen, and then that way you stay notified when we bring out new videos just like this every week. And if you've enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up. Thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.